Everyone has their own ideas of how to shut it down, but I'm content to stand in front of the gate all day and all night, said John Learning, who was arrested in 2012 for exercising his right to trap on traditional lands. And now the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric dam project in Labrador has led to the flooding of Mud Lake. Here, live by telephone today, we have Craig Chaulk of the Labrador Land and Water Protectors. Hi, Craig, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
And tell us what's the story about Mud Lake?
Well, I'm a long-term resident of Mud Lake as well as a protector and waterkeeper, as you just stated. And Mud Lake is a tiny community of about 50 people located about 30 miles downstream from the Muskrat Falls Hydro Dam project. We've been here for roughly 200 years, settled by trappers. And in the early 1900s, there was a large lumber operation here at the Dickey Lumber Company, and that employed a lot of the locals at the time, but it only lasted for less than 10 years. We've had flooding situations over the years on countless times during the spring breakup, but this year it was unprecedented. We have reached levels that we've never seen before in our lives. This was the first year that the Muskrat Falls project had a coffer dam in place, and we strongly believe that this influenced the breakup of the river this year. The water levels, as I stated, were high, we think because of the way that Nalcor was the company building the dam, the way they manipulated the water for the past several months, beginning in the fall prior to freeze-up. And when spring thaw began, the water was actually much higher during freeze-up last fall due to the fact that in November they had problems with their coffer dam. They had the reservoir filled to about 21.5 meters above sea level at the time, and when they discovered the problems, they let that water go. They said they were going to do it in a slow and controlled manner, but in fact, they released, they dropped the level of the reservoir by 8 meters in a span of less than 48 hours, and that really increased, obviously, the water downstream here just prior to freeze-up. So that's where the whole problem began.
How is Nalcor treating the protectors?
When the protectors go up and take a stand and try and shut the project down, Nalcor gets court injunctions, and the police come and issue arrests for people. Just recently, after the Mud Lake flooding, the protectors once again went to the gate at the Muskrat Falls site, and some were arrested again and had to appear in court a few days ago. 4 of them appeared in court, and 3 of them agreed to stay away from the site as per the injunction. But one young Inuk lady, Inuk, by the way, is a term for it's a singular term for the Inuit people. She took a stand and said, "No, I can't agree to that because it goes against our Aboriginal laws of protecting land and water," and she refused to agree to stay away from the site. And she subsequently has been held in custody since then, and is scheduled to appear in court again on the 9th of June.
Who is affected by the flooding of Mud Lake, and how?
It affects everybody in this tiny village, and it also affects people on the north side of the river across from us, a place called the Mud Lake Road, which is just outside of the town of Happy Valley Goose Bay. They've had flooding as well on the other side of the river, and it affects us because it totally disrupted our lives. Well, we had to evacuate. Well, we were alarmed in the middle of the night of the 16th of this month because the waters were starting to come over the high banks in the village, and the lower part of the village, the people had to evacuate just prior to dark by boat, and they had trouble getting to other areas of the village because of the drifting ice, and it was a stormy, dark night, and they managed to go and make it to friends and relatives' houses and they had to stay there until we could be evacuated the next morning by helicopter.
Where are the evacuated residents of Mud Lake staying?
When we were first evacuated, many of us went and stayed with friends and relatives in nearby Happy Valley Goose Bay, and since then, the ones that weren't able to return to the village because of the destruction to their property and homes, they've been housed at Five Wing Goose Bay in barracks there.
So what is being done to care for the evacuees?
Well, like I said, they were provided housing, and all the essentials are there, and they're just staying put until they can get their houses back in order. And for some of them, there are a handful where the houses are nearly completely destroyed, and the prospects of getting back anytime soon are not looking very good.
How will hunting, trapping, and fishing be affected by the floods?
Well, because of the dam and the manipulation of the waterways, we have to relearn ice conditions and all of that sort of thing. Also, methyl mercury is going to be increased because of the flooding of the land at the reservoir. So that's going to affect the food that we know traditionally harvest for food. And particularly hard hit in that area would be Rigolette, a little town about 90 miles downstream from here, right at the coast of the ocean, because they live in a more isolated location. Their cost of living is much more expensive than ours, so they rely more heavily on the traditional foods. People here in Upper Lake Melville also rely on it quite heavily, but in Rigolette it takes it to a whole new level.
What should the government be doing to correct what's happening at Mud Lake?
Well, what we are pushing for, the Labrador Land Protectors, is a full and independent review of the North Spur. Now, the North Spur is a component of the Muskrat Falls Dam. It's a natural component, and it's composed of very unstable soil known as glacial marine clay, which is known to liquefy, and it is the most unstable soil known to man, and this comprises nearly half of the proposed dam that they are constructing. So those of us downstream, we're very concerned, and we really fear that Nalcor did not properly assess that aspect of the dam, and that's why we're calling for a totally independent review of it to determine if, in fact, it has a chance of holding up when they inundate the reservoir, which will be a much greater volume of water than they've held back this year with their cofferdam. The level of the water right now, or before they released it this spring at the cofferdam, was about 21.5 meters above sea level, and with the new structure, when it's constructed, it will be holding back 39 meters of water above sea level. So that's a significant amount of water. And if that cofferdam, or if the North Spur does fail, the next flood will be much more disastrous than this one was.
What are the plans for the next year to correct the wrong that is happening at Mud Lake?
Well, the plan is to like as I just said, to push for an independent review on the North Spur. Also, the government has committed with our Aboriginal leaders to do a study on clearing the reservoir itself of vegetation to minimize the risk of the methyl mercury. So they were supposed to have dropped the water level down to summer levels this spring so that they can look at mitigating the effects of the methyl mercury, but to date, we're almost into summer now, and there has been absolutely nothing on that front so far.
So it has often been said that local leaders of Mud Lake have felt respectful towards the government, respectful towards Nalcor. Why is this true if they're being treated badly?
Well, I think what you're probably hearing there is the perspective of one individual who was a leader here, and she had faith in Nalcor and trusted them. But the common consensus here is people are concerned many, like myself, are very skeptical of Nalcor and have been from the onset because, there's been nothing but lies and deceit right from the get-go from them. And personally, I don't trust a word they've said, and I haven't from the beginning because, they just lied about all aspects of the project so far, and that trust has quickly faded from the ones that were kind of sitting on the fence.
How can our listeners become involved in Mud Lake and resolutions to the Muskrat Falls project?
Well, you can reach the Labrador Land Protectors on Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter, and people can also contact their MHAs and their MPs, the Minister of Aboriginal and Northern Affairs, their various government officials, and just voice your concern and inform them of the threat that this project is creating and the uncertainty with the stability of the North Spur in particular.
Well, thank you for your time today, Craig Chaulk.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Craig Chaulk speaking about Mud Lake floods and the Muskrat Falls Hydroelectric Dam project. I am your host, Sheila Ferrando, and you are listening to the Wednesday Morning After on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.